Let me tell you a story about my grandma and I and my dog. I'm 10 years old, and I'm sitting in my backyard, which I do generally from mid-spring all the way to the end of the summer. And it didn't happen every day, Janice, but it happened a lot of days that I would go back out about 2/3 in the back of the yard, and I would sit in a nice soft spot. And my Sheltie, which is like a miniature collie, who was my best friend, my best friend. I love this dog. And he just adored me, since he was my little traveling buddy since he was a little tiny puppy. And I just adored him. And he just went wherever I went. And I would sit, and I said we would sit out in the backyard. I would sit down first, and then of course he would circle me 2 or 3 times and sit right next to me on my right. And we would just stare up at the sky or look around in the back. Our house sat on the back of a creek, and then you could see the backyards of everybody else on the other side. And I would look at the trees, and I would look at the clouds, and I would see the sky, and I would start talking to my dog as though I was talking to any other friend. But I just had this wonderful relationship with this furry little creature of black and tan and white. And eventually I would have conversations with him about what I was imagining. And it all started from looking up at the clouds and sometimes, seeing a tree or a leaf or a bird or a squirrel or whatever. And I would talk to him, and I doubted he knew more than, half a dozen words that I would say, but it was just wonderfully connected. Well, my grandmother would be at the back window of the house, which is over the sink in the kitchen. And she hated to put on the air conditioning, so she would raise up the windows, and she would constantly be at the sink, which is next to the stove, doing something. And she could clearly hear what I was saying to the dog, and I'm sure it amused the heck out of her. And after a while, she would inevitably bring out her standard glass of lemonade. And one time she heard me talking about something I wanted to invent from what I saw in the clouds. Now, it was a silly thing, but it was real to me. And my dog was obviously interested because he loved it when I put my arm around him. And so what was interesting about this is when my grandmother came out with the lemonade and I had my arm around my dog, and then I started pointing up in the sky, she said, "Here, Etwood." That's how she said Edward. Etwood in her southern thing. "Now, Etwood, what are we dreaming about today?" And I had a sense that, it gave her joy to insert herself in what her grandson was doing. I'm sure she also found it a little amusing because I was as cute as I could be, talking to the dog and dreaming about stuff. And so she would say, "What are we dreaming about today?" And I would tell her. And inevitably, she would engage herself in my dreaming, whatever I was describing to her. And she would always ask, the first two questions are always the same. "Tell me more." And then after whatever I said, she'd say, "Why do you think that would be important? How's that going to help people? How's that going to help you?" And she would make me flesh out what I was envisioning, dreaming about. She would provide an expansion of what I was imagining and then try to put a value on it based on a practical usage, even if I had to imagine inventing it. One of my favorite envisioning was when I thought what a wonderful thing it would be to ride on the clouds and allow the wind to take me to places where I could see even more new things and more new people. and more new experiences. And I remember telling her that, and she got finished with, tell me more. Why would that be important? I looked around and I said, Grandma, you got to be kidding me. You can't see the value of riding above all of this and seeing something new every day. And it was the first time that my grandmother sat down on the other side of my dog, rubbed my back, and said, what can we imagine? What new sights could there be? Imagine, Janice, how empowering that was to a 10-year-old little boy. And I did that, I guess, for basically the better part of 2 years before apparently I got too cool to sit out in the backyard next to my dog. Now, here's how you develop Christians in moving beyond fear and failure to not assume mediocrity is okay. Develop a series of segmental successes so that they begin to assume the typical reality for them in excellence. What was is no longer defined because we have died, what's called died with Christ in the Bible. Died with Christ is not about our sin. It's about our connection and current definition of how we're connected to the context of our lives at that moment. I'm just a woman. I just come from this part of town. I only have one arm. I never finished high school. My last 3 boyfriends have all beat me and called me whores and stupid, whatever, and I'm not worth anything. And my father and mother, didn't do this to me. And, and I'm not making fun of that. I mean, you tell people enough negatives, you impose on them enough restrictions, they're going to start believing it. And when you become a Christian, you die to all of that because you start, even though it's difficult, even though it's challenging, a new way of understanding the life that has been given to you. When we die with Christ, we also die to what we were defined as being. You can't get to excellence if you're still defined by what you used to be, because then you're going to only do what you used to do. You remember, I know I've talked about this incessantly, and I really shouldn't because it's turning into a prideful thing. And it's not like I can do it every day anymore. But I've talked periodically about Robert McFerrin's head tone technique, which legitimately only works on men because they're the only ones that have the equipment to do that. And I tried for months, Janice, to do that. I listened intently. He demonstrated it over and over and over and over again. And I couldn't imagine it. I couldn't imagine it. And what he did was, he said, here's what I want you to do. Let's sit down and have a little cup of tea. And I want you to sip it. And I'm going to sing to you. And I'm only going to use my head voice. Head voices cannot be loud. Because at a certain point, the vocal folds will force you into your falsetto. Mm-hmm. You cannot go to head voice in your upper register unless you are lowering gently the volume to allow for this particular, physical attribute that men have that most will never use to happen. Now, he had told me that, I'm not kidding you, 100 times before. And I just couldn't get it. And he said, he did this to me. Now, I've been talking loud, so I might not be able to do it now, but whatever he was doing, I had a half a cup of tea, and he said, I want you to I don't want you to whisper, but I do want you to talk quietly. And I want you remember how I showed you how a pronounced but controlled roar gives you the clarity of your middle register? I said, yes. He said, now I want you to sneak up on it. And he did this to me. Now, again, I may not be successful because I've been talking loud. But he said, after he took a sip of tea, he said, tell me why I am not speaking in falsetto. And yet, I'm not talking in my chest voice. And I'm certainly not pretending to be a girl. And I laughed. And he says, but what's very important is that once you take and feel this voice, you'll then extend it like you did with your powerful roar. And you will discover that once you learn how to extend this head voice, it becomes sweet. That's what he said, sweet. And he went like this. Now, let me say, you are. And I said, oh, that sounds nice. He said, I don't want your compliments. I want you to say, no. And I did it. Mm-hmm. And once I did it, I never was able to not do it because I felt it. Yeah. He led me. And God, that man had the patience of Job, because for 6, 7, 8 months, I'm telling you, I just couldn't imagine it. Mm-hmm. But once it hit, I went, oh, well, that's easy. But it wasn't easy until I experienced a small portion. That's to learn how to be and expect excellence requires someone else, Janice, to show you how to do segmented success. Having a cup of tea. That's not, no. That's not the same voice. It's not just singing more quietly. It's a completely different voice.
I know.
And it is dramatically difficult to teach men how to do that, because they're used to making fun of the girl's voice with falsetto. God forbid they learn how to hold the tone in their regular voice. That's pretty well all they know how to do. Mediocrity. But once you open their eyes and get them to sense that segmented success, excellence is really just a short trip away. So that's that third thing down there. We are compelled to dream. Compelled. When you are a maturing Christian, not a new one, but you've worked at it a little while. People have put you in an environment to empower you to sense and feel and experience segmented successes beyond mediocrity. You've moved past the assumptions of fear or the kind of really heartache sometimes, depending on how bad the failures are. And you've started to readjust your thinking and actions to find success. And then if you are blessed enough and God puts people in your place to help you dream, you then become compelled to keep dreaming. And if you're lucky, somebody will come up to you with a glass of lemonade while you're hugging on your dog and say, what are we dreaming about today?